A proclamation, to Attorney General Barr and Secretary of State Michael Pompeo. June 15, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. It has come to our attention that both of you may be ignorant of the actual history of this country. This in itself is normal, because none of us have been taught the actual history in school. However, those of us who have taken the time and made the effort to learn are in position to assist in clearing up several pervasive confusions. First, the only entities involved in the American Civil War were federal states of states, not the actual states of the Union. The American Civil War was in fact a mercenary conflict. It was never properly declared by any Congress, and it has never been resolved by a peace treaty. Those federal states of states, which are, whether North or South, all Confederate States, have yet to be reconstructed, a circumstance that has never been fully explained to the American public and which has never been corrected as a result. Second, this circumstance leaves a third of the federal government inoperable, and from our perspective, the most important part, that which is supposed to be operated by Americans for Americans. The British territorial contractors and the Holy Roman Empire's municipal contractors eagerly entered the power vacuum created by this situation and secretively substituted their own states of states organizations for ours, operating like cuckoo birds occupying a nest. They also incorporated their service delivery operations, so that in fact, we have private foreign chartered, for-profit commercial corporations masquerading as our government. Third, this is not what we are owed in terms of treaty or commercial contract, and it stands before the entire world as an affront to decency and good faith and service by both the Queen's government and the Holy See, that we, the Americans, have not been fully informed and have not been assisted to restore the functions of the federal government. Fourth, it is also an affront that our states have been accidentally on purpose mistaken for rival commercial corporations, and our people have been mischaracterized both as combatants and as commercial vessels, when it has been plainly stated and well established ever since the Civil War that we are a separate population with a sovereign civilian government of our own that you are all employed by. Fifth, for your edification, the United States, a union of soil jurisdiction states, controls the soil jurisdiction of this country. The United States of America, a federation of land jurisdiction states, controls the international jurisdiction of this country. Our States of America organization is supposed to be in control of the bulk of the federal functions delegated under the constitutional agreements. Sixth, because of the foregoing situation and out of self-interested deceit, both the British territorial government and the Holy Roman Empire's municipal government have been operating commercial corporations in our names and employing our delegated powers in unauthorized ways. The British territorial government has been operating as the United States of America, and the HRE municipal government has been operating as the United States. These are not our proper names, and it needs to be fully understood that nothing our employees do or say while acting as our agents in any way countermands what we tell you ourselves, nor does their bankruptcy affect us beyond the fact that we must find new service providers. Seventh, this basic misunderstanding has led to a situation in which the British territorial and municipal governments have imagined themselves to be the only governments present on our land, and they have proposed that all Americans are born as dual citizens of their respective commercial corporations, owing duty to the Holy See and the British territorial government, which is deliberate self-interested misrepresentation of the facts. The Americans are still here, still minding our lawful, and to put a fine point on it, sovereign government of every state of the Union. We don't belong to you, you belong to us. You are our employees, not the Queen's, not the Pope's, and it is time for all these false claims in commerce to cease and desist. Eighth, Americans are born as nationals of their respective states, and those states are not subject to any commercial corporation on earth. We are Minnesotans and Georgians, Californians and Texans. We are not born as, nor do we choose to adopt either brand of federal citizenship, neither United States citizens nor citizens of the United States. Those citizenship statuses were created under the respective constitutions and have no meaning apart from the constitutional agreements that both the Queen and the Pope stand in breach of. Ninth, since the 1930s the HRE municipal government has been telling a most pernicious lie and making an absolutely outrageous false claim in commerce, a claim that is false on the face of it. They have claimed that Franklin Delano Roosevelt's first inaugural address created a public trust, and that all our assets, personal, private, and public, were rolled into this express trust. In fact, this is self-interested poppycock. 10th, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was being sworn in as President of the United States, the municipal United States government operated by the Holy See. He was addressing the citizens of the United States, the employees and dependents of the municipal United States government, and could not be presumed to be addressing anyone else just because they were in earshot. His language throughout is consistent with this interpretation, and no other performance would have been legal. 11th, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had no authority to establish any express trust related to rank-and-file Americans and no authority to conscript anyone on our shores. There is no evidence that any public trust was in fact established as a result of his verbiage. Rather, there is evidence of illegal and immoral and unlawful taking of our property and assets and use of legal chicanery to falsely claim that our private property magically became part of the Public Charitable Trust (PCT) set up as a welfare trust for former plantation slaves in the wake of the Civil War. 12th, no American was ever under any obligation to reply to or rebut Roosevelt's presumptions, because we were not addressed. The only persons having any such obligation to rebut were the citizens of the United States at that time, and only a small portion of the population, approximately 15%, was or is legitimately in that political status then or now. 13th, these false presumptions, which could only apply to a small percentage of the population, and which were never fully disclosed to anyone by Roosevelt's speech, have since been used to plunder and pillage and abuse and conscript millions of Americans in the greatest fraud and identity theft scheme in history, which is now discovered and firmly rebutted as nothing more or less than commercial constructive fraud. 14th, as a result of the aforementioned collapse of the States of America Confederacy and the secretive usurpation that took place in the 1860s, by definition, the bulk of Americans were not operating in commerce in 1933. A gift of a commercial franchise operated in our names and conferred upon us without our knowledge or consent and used to make false claims of citizenship obligation upon us was an act of self-interested fraud, and any acceptance of such gifts offered under color of law is revealed to be nothing but more crime and chicanery designed to alter our birthright political status as Americans in contravention of the Geneva Conventions. 15th, the foreign commercial corporations which have been operating on our shores in our purported absence and which have been promoting these crimes against us are being liquidated for cause, and no new contracts have been issued to the perpetrators. Our property being held by Attorney General Barr in his inherited capacity as alien property custodian is owed immediate return to the rightful owners, and all presumption that we are or ever were enemies must be dropped along with all the false claims against our property interests. 16th, as these acts were all promulgated by breach of international treaties and commercial contracts and were promoted via inland piracy, no change of ownership from the original American ownership can be implied. We find that the Congress has attempted to insulate itself from the curse of its own actions by adding a disclaimer to the enabling clause of every act of Congress since 1861, this act shall not affect any rights thus previously established. In effect, every American who has ancestors who were present on our soil prior to 1861 is grandfathered in and owed every jot of all three constitutions and all rights and benefits that have accrued since then. 17th, as a result of the foregoing, 1. No presumption of animosity or enemy combatant status can be advanced against our actual states of the Union nor our people. 2. No presumption of 14th Amendment citizenship can be applied to anyone who isn't both the progeny of former plantation slaves and also currently receiving unearned federal welfare benefits from the Public Charitable Trust. 3. Strawman municipal commercial trusts and utilities issued in our names must be presumed to be gifts without strings attached, admitted to be tax purchase, and we ourselves must be held harmless in all respects to the extent that those commercial entities are used for any purpose. 18th, prompt correction for all these ills and misunderstandings must be provided, and those operating the court system must be re-educated and given new instructions fully informing them to stand down and cease making the presumptions under which they have been operating. Proper passports for actual Americans functioning as state nationals or state citizens must either be provided or we will provide them ourselves. Likewise, most Americans don't drive or operate commercial motor vehicles, and they need to have proper identification of their private automobiles and their private status as travelers. Again, your agencies may be hired to provide this service or we will provide it ourselves, but you cannot just wave your hands and pretend that everyone in America is involved in interstate commerce and subject to commercial law. 19th, all the corporate law enforcement personnel need to be informed that they are operating in a private, for hire capacity under the Pinkerton laws and have no special authority or public bonding for what they are doing, that they are working for foreign, for-profit, privately held commercial corporations in a mercenary capacity and are not allowed to bully, harass, enter private property, or charge Americans for any infraction that does not directly impair the U.S. mail or actually occur on the trains or railroad right-of-way. 20th, all the banks need to be informed that accounts held in the names of living people and unincorporated businesses cannot be misidentified as accounts belonging to commercial franchises of any U.S. or USA corporation and that such accounts are not subject to lien or seizure on the basis of the existence of Social Security numbers or other evidence obtained under color of law, force, coercion, non-disclosure, or implied, unilateral, or unconscionable contract. 21st, the IRS and the Internal Revenue Service have both been operating wildly out of context and without authority on our shores and must be severely corrected and repurposed. These organizations have been operating under the false presumption that all Americans are U.S. citizens or citizens of the United States and playing a pillar-to-post confiscation fraud scheme, pretending that Americans have to be either U.S. citizens or citizens of the United States, or both, when in fact Americans are owed full recognition of the fact that they are Americans without any federal citizenship obligations at all. Most Americans are not in receipt of any federal income and are in fact holding the majority of federal debt as priority creditors. 22nd, these facts may be difficult to hear, bear, and deal with, but they are nonetheless facts, and they have been fully vetted, fully investigated, and are known throughout the higher levels of the global community. Any attempt to kill off your priority creditors so as to enforce these numerous and egregious false claims upon us will be instantly recognized for the criminal activity that such attacks against civilian populations always represent. The lawlessness and criminality of the corporations and boards of directors involved will be fully exposed and the corporations responsible will be subject to liquidation. 23rd, generations of Americans have been used and abused as mercenaries in wars for profit without their knowledge or consent. This practice, too, is built upon false presumptions of citizenship obligations that do not exist. The Selective Service needs to be shut down permanently, and all recruitment activity in the armed services required to fully disclose the nature of the work being offered, the risks, and the rewards, such as they are. In the absence of any war directly threatening our borders, no pretense that they will be defending their homeland can be used as an excuse to con these young people into employment as mercenaries. 24th, our employees are required to act honorably and to provide good faith service to their actual employers, that means, us, the American people. None of the circumstance we have described above meets those criteria and our extreme displeasure has been conveyed to both the Queen and the Pope and the United Nations. As things stand, both the territorial and municipal governments are out of compliance with the Hague Conventions, territorial, and the Geneva Conventions, municipal, and the corporations responsible are continuing to act in a rogue, outlaw capacity with respect to their own employers as well as the international community at large. 25th, we are calling upon both the United States Attorney General and the Secretary of State to make correction within your respective spheres of duty. Mr. Barr is being called upon to perform under the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the United States to return our private and public alien property unharmed and unencumbered. Mr. Pompeo is being called upon to provide a process by which Americans claiming their birthright political status may be recognized and identified and set free of these noxious false presumptions of federal citizenship. Most sincerely, Anna Maria Riesinger, Fiduciary. C.C. President Donald Trump. United Nations Secretariat.